Good evening and thank you for joining us. Today is Keqiang Festival. Many Hong Kong people have flocked to the mainland for the three-day holiday. Multiple border checkpoints swamped with cross-border travelers, with the MTR being forced to adjust train frequencies in the morning and early afternoon. With this year's Keqiang Festival falling on a Friday, that means many Hong Kong people can enjoy an extended three-day-long weekend. Some Hong Kong people have chosen to head up north. At the Tuen Mun Town Centre bus station, long queues for buses heading towards the Shenzhen Bay port. Citybus sent more staff to maintain order. Ms. Feng here says she is taking a day trip to the mainland as her child has to take tutorial classes tomorrow. Mr. Yeung said he plans to just stroll around some shopping malls and see if there are any discounted buffets across the border. Authorities report a traffic congestion around the Shenzhen Bay Bridge. Long queues at the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridgeport. It took nearly an hour for passengers to board the Zhuhai-bound bus. Throngs of people too around the West Kowloon station of the high-speed rail. Many parents took their children to the mainland. Staff members on site to help direct the crowds. Even longer lines around the waiting hall. Mr. Ho said he is bringing his students to Nan Ao Island in Shantou, Guangdong. And there were way more people than he imagined. Mr. Yip meanwhile noted how the border crossing seemed as busy as the New Year travel rush. A tourism sector representative said at least 800 tour groups set out from Hong Kong today. Most are short-haul trips to the mainland. Timothy Choi, executive director of the Hong Kong Tourism Association, said travel to the mainland has become part of Hong Kong people's habits. He noted with the autumn weather now, many choose to visit Chaoshan in Guangdong, which consists of the cities of Chaozhou, Keqiang, and Shantou. Some also can visit hot springs in Chonghua. He added traveling to nearby mainland cities is much more cost-effective. Many people observed the tradition of Keqiang Festival by tomb sweeping. Cemeteries across the city today were full of residents who were paying their respects to their ancestors. Mo Sing-ai reports.
On Friday morning, residents arrived at Pok Fu Hill in Sha Tin with their family members to perform tomb sweeping. Many brought offerings and joss paper, to which Cape Collison Chinese Permanent Cemetery in Taiwan. These escalators, which were built last year, became a handy traveling option. Some residents said the price of the offering had increased compared to previous years.
A little bit.
By how much would you say?
By how much? Maybe $20 or $13. In the past year, I would go after this because to avoid so many people.
Chicken, rice, some tax.
This boy who visited the cemetery with his dad said the weather was pleasant for tomb sweeping.
It's not raining, so it is good.
Some police officers are stationed in the area to facilitate the flow of people. Meanwhile, the Fire Services Department and Civil Aid Service patrolled at different tomb sweeping hotspots to remind the public to act responsibly so as to prevent hill fires. Mo Sing-ai, TVB News.
The government held a ceremony at the Memorial Garden of the City Hall in Central to pay tribute to those who sacrificed their lives to protect the city during the Second World War. The ceremony began at 8 a.m. A 2-minute silence was observed. In attendance was Chief Executive John Lee, representatives from Beijing's offices in Hong Kong, the judiciary, former Chief Executive Donald Tsang, President of the Legislative Council Andrew Leung, Convener of the Executive Council Regina Ip, and representatives of the Hong Kong Independent Battalion of the Dongjiang or East River Column also laid wreaths. John Lee posted on social media saying that the heroes who died in the war should be remembered, with important lessons learned from history to cherish the hard-won peace. It's understood Chief Executive John Lee's policy address to be unveiled next week may include a pilot scheme for student accommodation. It aims to expedite the finding of land and the approval of applications for the construction of student dormitories. Last year's policy address proposed to develop Hong Kong into an international tertiary education hub, doubling the number of non-local student places in the 8 UGC-funded universities. But some mainland students at the University of Hong Kong had to fork out monthly rents of $15,000 for accommodation. Surveyors estimated a shortage of more than 9,200 dorm places in Hong Kong this academic year. Sources say the policy address will propose a one-stop consulting service for colleges and universities that will speed up the processing and approval of construction projects for student hostels. It will also support universities' efforts to build student dormitories. A private car hit and killed a wild boar on Clearwater Bay Road in Sai Kung this morning. This as 5 firefighters were injured after reaching the site to help after their fire truck was accidentally rear-ended. The incident unfolded at about 11 a.m. A wild boar charged towards the road and was struck by a Kowloon-bound car on Clearwater Bay Road. A fire engine later stopped at the scene to assist in the incident, but another truck behind failed to brake in time and crashed into the fire engine. Police are investigating the cause of both accidents. The carcass of the wild boar has been handed over to the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department. Sustaining light injuries to 5 firefighters have been taken to hospital for treatment. Overseas, an Israeli strike on the United Nations headquarters in southern Lebanon has drawn widespread international condemnation. 2 peacekeepers were injured as Israel targets what it says are military sites of Lebanese group Hezbollah. Hezbollah also continued to fire rockets into Israel. Meanwhile, Israel launched its deadliest raid on the Lebanese capital Beirut so far, with at least 22 reported dead. Nasvi Karim with more.
Smoke rises from a building in Lebanon's Nakura region. This is the headquarters of the United Nations Peacekeeping Force, UNIFIL, which came under Israeli attack. 2 Indonesian peacekeepers were injured and sent to hospital, the UN said, adding that its headquarters and nearby positions have been repeatedly hit by Israel.
2 peacekeepers were wounded when earlier today a UN post, OP-14, in UNIFIL's headquarters in Nakura was hit by tank fire. Close by, also early this morning, IDF soldiers fired on the UN position.
Israel's envoy to the United Nations, Danny Danon, put the blame on Lebanese group Hezbollah, which has been trading fire with Israel across their border since October 7, 2023 attacks on Israel by Palestinian group Hamas.
And this council was warned. On September 20, I stood before you and urged you to act before it was too late. I told you, and I quote, "When the time comes, do not look to us for blame in protecting our people. Now is your time to speak up and act before we have to. Your silence has forced our hand."
Several countries, including Italy, France, Spain and Jordan, denounced the attacks on the UN base. Italy's Defense Minister Guido Crosetto, at a press conference in Rome, said the violations could be considered a war crime. Meanwhile, in the Lebanese capital Beirut, dozens were killed and many more wounded after Israeli strikes on 2 central neighborhoods. Witnesses said the first strike hit the lower half of an apartment building and the second collapsed an entire structure, engulfing it in flames. In Gaza, at least 27 people were killed in an Israeli strike on a school sheltering the displaced. At least 1 child and 7 women lost their lives. The Israeli military had launched a large-scale air and ground operation against Hamas in northern Gaza earlier this week. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
China's envoy to the United Nations condemned Israel's attack on UN peacekeepers while demanding urgent investigation and accountability for the incident. In New York, China's permanent representative to the UN, Fu Cheng, voiced grave concern at a Security Council briefing. Fu noted any deliberate attack on peacekeepers is a serious breach of the international humanitarian law. Such behavior must be put to an end, he said, calling for a ceasefire and diplomatic solution to the conflict. He said Israel should stop violating Lebanon's sovereignty. Israeli authorities said they maintain routine communication with UNIFIL and recommended the force to relocate north to avoid danger as fighting intensifies. The 3-day Asean summit came to a close in the Lao capital, Vientiane, today. Mimo Shanghai reports.
On the final day of the ASEAN summit, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken joined the conference. Blinken was asked about his comments on Premier Li Qiang's speech about Asia on Thursday. The U.S. top diplomat said America will continue to work with ASEAN countries.
The United States remains the #1 source of foreign direct investment in ASEAN countries. This is a meaningful measure. It's also a powerful generator of jobs and opportunity.
Li Qiang also attended the final day of the summit and had exchanges with foreign leaders, including the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Christopher Luxon. In his speech, Li said China is ready to support ASEAN as a core institution in the region alongside other countries. News 9, TVB News.
Premier Li Qiang earlier met with Japan's new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba in the Lao capital on the sidelines of the ASEAN leaders' meetings on East Asia cooperation. Both affirmed their commitment to promoting mutually beneficial ties. Danny Zhou reports.
The 30-minute in-person talk on Thursday was the first meeting between the two leaders since they assumed their respective positions. Premier Li Qiang said Sino-Japan relations is now in a pivotal phase of improvement and development, and Beijing intends to work towards a constructive and stable relationship suitable for the new age. Calling for the countries to jointly safeguard the global free trade system, Li noted scientific innovation, the digital economy and green development are among the fields that China seeks more cooperation. The two vowed to strengthen high-level exchanges and intensify communication at all levels. Ishiba stressed the two countries have the potential for cooperation and that Japan has no intention of decoupling or severing industrial and supply chains with China. He added the Japanese side is willing to resolve pending issues through consultation, and its position on the Taiwan issue remains unchanged. Meanwhile, Ishiba, who had called for a sort of Asian version of the NATO alliance, raised concerns of the situation in the East China Sea and increasing Chinese presence in areas surrounding Japan. Ishiba was also looking to early resumption of Chinese seafood imports in China after Beijing lifted the blanket ban. He also asked for a thorough investigation into the fatal stabbing that killed a Japanese boy in Shenzhen last month. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
And that's the news. Thank you for watching.